My name is Daver, and in this video, I'm going to unbox, set up, and test out the BestArc MiG 145 3-in-1 welder. Also, this is my first time welding ever, so stick around. Get it? Stick around, it's a welding pun. Anyways, this is Daver Made. Thanks for checking out this video and checking out my channel. It's been a while since I made a video, which I'll talk more about in my next video if I get around to making that. But BestArc reached out to me and asked if I would like to test out and make a video on one of their welders. That said, they sent me this welder for free, and I'm under no financial obligation to give it a positive review. Now, I've always wanted to learn how to weld and start getting into metalworking, so I thought this was a great opportunity and said, of course, I would love to check it out and make a video on it. This was also a good time to take a break from YouTube. As I mentioned, BestArc sent me this 145 MiG welder at no cost to me. That said, I'm gonna be honest and share some thoughts as someone who's literally never welded before and see if this makes a good welder for a beginner. Now, full disclaimer, I'm not an expert. I'm a beginner and I have so much to learn about welding. And as you'll see in this video, and as I found out, there is a reason people go to trade school to learn how to weld. However, if you are an expert and you have any tips or tricks, please comment below and share so you can help myself and others. Also, please don't be a jerk. At the time of making this video, this welder is available for sale on Amazon for $129 USD plus tax, which in my opinion is a reasonable price for any tool when you're wanting to dabble in something new or just get started. Now, as far as unboxing goes, this was pretty simple, which will be the theme of this welder, as you'll see throughout the video. There were only two things inside this box. Well, if you don't count the styrofoam padding. There was the welder and the box for the accessories. A simple unboxing. That's it. Now let's talk about what comes with the welder. This welder comes with one earth clamp for grounding, one stick holder for holding electrodes, a shoulder strap for taking this welder with you to the mall, I don't know, an additional wire feed roller, the other one's already installed, 3 additional contact tips, there is one also in the torch itself, and a spool of gasless welding wire, a MiG torch which is already connected to the welder in the box, and the manual. Now, this welder is a 3-in-1 welder, and this model has multi-function for gasless flux core MiG welding, lift TIG welding, and stick welding. Now, if you don't know, which I didn't know before making this video, MiG stands for metal inert gas. And according to the internet, this is an excellent choice for beginning welders such as myself. Now, TIG welding stands for tungsten inert gas. I don't demonstrate that in this video, but it is an option for this welder. Now, this welder also does stick welding, also known as shielded metal arc welding, or SMAW, or manual metal arc welding, MMA. Not that kind of MMA. Now, this is also a welding process that uses a flux-coated electrode to create the weld, and I do try that out. For this specific model of welder, the maximum current is 135 amps, which kind of makes me wonder why this is called the 145A model, even though it's only 135 amps. Again, this supports gasless flux cord MiG wire and can use 0.03 inches, 0.035 inches, and 0.04 inch wire sizes. This can weld stainless steel and carbon steel. This welder also has a digital screen display that displays voltage, current, and other parameters that will be helpful while you're welding. And the cool thing is you should be able to see the screen readout through your welding mask, so you don't have to remove it. Now, another feature of this welder is something called synergetic control, which automatically matches the recommended voltage with the wire speed. And if you're new such as myself, or know not much about welding, I think this is very helpful for getting your first welds made accurately and as best as they could be. This specific model of welder supports 110. However, there is another version that supports 110 and 220. The MIG torch is 6.5 feet long, and that includes the torch head, just an FYI, which is enough length for anyone who's using this to easily move around the welding area. The welder weighs just 13 pounds, and it comes with a shoulder strap, as I mentioned earlier, for easily transporting it and using it outdoors. Now let's go over some of the functions on the screen display. Now this welder automatically identifies the voltage of the machine, and it will light up to tell you what voltage it is using. Now there's also a fan on this welder, and it only kicks on if it is too hot. So if you don't hear it right away, it doesn't mean the fan's broken. It just means that the machine isn't hot. Now in terms of MIG welding, there are two options for working the torch. There's also an indicator if you're in gas or gasless mode on the machine. You can also change the different welding mode between MIG, TIG, and MMA or stick welding. And then you can also change the wire welding diameter that you are using for your MIG weld. So make sure that you have the appropriate diameter selected. And then you have the synergetic control, which automatically matches the recommended voltage and the wire speed, which is very helpful for beginners. And then also you can change the voltage and adjust the range from plus 3 volts to minus 3 volts. Now it was time to test out this bad boy. But first, I needed to get some welding gear since this was like the first time I've ever welded in my life. And I also needed to research what gear I needed to get started. So I did what anyone does who needs new tools they've never used before, but they're not really sure they're gonna use them long term. I went to Harbor Freight. I purchased a welding mask, some welding gloves, a fire resistant blanket, cause you know, I'm in a wood shop, welding pliers. I also got some welding magnets, a holder for the nozzle, the gun. After more research, I learned that's not all you need to get started. So I got a welding shirt and I also got a welding table, and this really started to add up. So there was a lot of safety things that I needed to do before I could start my very first weld. Here I am setting up my very first welding table that I got off Amazon, and I don't want to name the brand because this table was a big pain in the ass to put together, and there were pieces and parts missing and other pieces and parts that clearly didn't go to this table. So I had to go to my extra nuts and bolts bin to finish the assembly on this. And this really took a long time. So I'll spare you the details. I figured it out best I could. It wasn't very sturdy, which is very frustrating, but I did the best I could, and this will be my beginning welding table. After many frustrating minutes putting that table together, it was time to start my first weld. And for my first weld, I was going to do some MIG wire welding. So the first thing you want to do is, it seems obvious, but power on the machine. Once you've powered on the machine, then you want to select the welding mode, which I'm going to be doing MIG welding. Next, I went to select my wire diameter size. Now, one small gripe was that the wire size on the spool was in millimeters and the machine is in inches. Now, to get set up for MIG welding, you need to load the wire into the welder. Now, not so pro tip, the instructions are on the inside of the cover to load this wire. Now, there are some basic instructions in the manual, but the detailed instructions are on the lid, and I highly recommend you follow those. It'll save you a lot of time. I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of stressful trying to keep this welding wire all together while trying to install it. However, that said, if I had read the instructions on the lid, I probably would have saved a lot of time and stress getting this loaded. Once you get the wire loaded, you can actually feed it through to the torch by hitting the wire feed button, which is a red button, and that'll feed the wire through to the end of the torch so you can start your first weld. Again, I don't know if I did something wrong here, but the spool was kind of coming loose I've read that that's not a good thing when you're trying to weld, but hopefully it works. Spoiler, it kind of did, but yeah. And then a very, 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 very important step is connecting the earth clamp, and the manual says to plug it into the positive socket. And you're going to use this to clamp to the bench or the workpiece that you are using. Now I got a scrap piece of stainless steel to practice welding on, and I'm just pretty much going to draw some lines and do my best to follow those lines with the torch. Now, I'm not welding anything. I'm just trying to get a feel for welding in general and using a MIG torch. That is a terrible, terrible weld. And I'm not gonna lie, this was way harder than I thought it would be, but that is not the welder's fault. That is my fault and not understanding really what I was doing. But I was learning on the fly, and you can see that I wasn't getting a good contact and the wire kind of kept feeding, but I wasn't getting any welds. So I did some adjusting and just tried to troubleshoot this. And like I do with many things, I just try to learn by doing. After thoroughly embarrassing myself with the MIG torch and trying to do some MIG welding, I wanted to try to do some stick welding, and I purchased some electrodes at Menards, and I had done some more research on how to do some stick welding and kind of get it started. There's also some tips in the manual for stick operation, which was very helpful. I did have, I guess, which is a very common issue, is trying to get the weld going and getting the electrode stuck to my scrap piece here. However, that said, eventually I felt better doing the stick welding than I did with the MIG welding. Although I did run into some issues, which I guess are pretty common for noobs such as myself. So after testing the stick welding and the MIG welding, I felt brave enough to assemble this little welding kit that I purchased off Amazon. Just a heads up, I was a little overconfident, and eventually that turned into frustration. So I don't actually complete the box, but I did give it the old college try and ended up doing a pretty terrible job, and thought I should stop before I got way ahead of myself. I'm very happy with how easy this welder was to get set up. Again, I think that the wire spool for the MIG operation was my fault. Other than that, it's a pretty plug and play machine. And for someone who's never welded before, it's pretty accessible to get started and learn how to weld. I'm not going to be putting together any freighters anytime soon, but I do feel like this opens a door, especially with woodworking and metalworking that has not been there before. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video and got something out of it. And hopefully this will help you decide whether or not this is the welder you should consider, especially if you are just getting started, such as myself. I appreciate you watching this video and checking out my channel. And until next time, take care.